if the election were held today, they would lose 40 to 45 seats. It would blow them out of the water. Safe Republican seats would be gone all over the country. They would lose the Senate if the election were held today. Now, I don't think the Senate is as likely to go Democratic as some people, but it's on the table now.
Hi, I'm Fergus Macphee, and welcome to the Trump Report. You can watch us every day, Monday to Friday, on our YouTube channel, and you can also listen and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Joining me today is Rick Wilson, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Rick, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Great to be back with you, Fergus.
Now, we're only going to be talking about one thing today, Rick, and the big news today is that the Border Patrol Commander, Gregory Bavino, and some immigration agents will be leaving Minneapolis. That's, of course, after the second killing by officers over the weekend, this time of Alex Pretty. Now, I obviously know Trump's been given the nickname Taco by some, but this feels a little bit different. I mean, what we've seen over the last 24 hours has almost been a kind of like public walking back of the entire rhetoric and strategy that's dominated Trump 2.0. Is this because, essentially we've seen all this footage, we've all seen the footage, they've kind of been caught out and they've seen just how much public opinion has turned against what they've been doing in the city?
The public opinion shift on immigration for Trump has been absolutely cataclysmic for him. This was the one issue in the face of very negative economic polling, very negative foreign policy leadership polling, very negative views of the future, and very negative views of the status of the country at the moment. All of it was bad for Trump, but immigration was this one bright light he could hold on to. He was net positive on immigration polling until recently. Now he is about 20 points underwater on it. This is a shift that the Republican Congress, which has been very much sort of a rubber stamp for Trump in the last year, forever, but the last year in particular, they're panicking. They now see a scenario where if Trump is upside down on this issue, which is one of the few things that glues their base together ideologically, if he's upside down on this issue, and these visuals are so striking and so horrifying to Americans, and they're undeniable, they fear that there's going to be not a 10 or 20 seat wipeout in the fall, but a 40 or 50 seat wipeout in the fall, and not only remove Republicans from control of the House, but possibly also from the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, is that kind of, I don't want to extrapolate too much into the UK, but I think it's kind of often said here in the UK that Labour are more the party of the NHS. Maybe if they're going to make policy of the NHS, people don't bat an eyelid too much, whereas if another party does it, they might say something. As you just said, immigration is kind of like Republican ground. I mean, this is a serious problem, right? The figures are that I think that the approval rating on what they've done in Minnesota is about 39%, and 58% said that ICE had gone too far in the city.
And look, the Trump base definitionally in American polling is between 35 and 39%. 39 on an issue like immigration, 35 on things like trade and tariffs right now. So Trump's numbers, the trend line on every single one of Trump's approval numbers, whether it's the economy, foreign policy, or immigration, is down. But the speed with which the immigration number has fallen since it catalyzed with the killing of Renee Good, but it is now a calamity for them with the killing of Alex Pretty. And I say this advisedly, but the video of Renee Good's murder still had a little bit of ambiguity to it. You couldn't see the exact clarity of the frame where he was standing in front of the car or side of the car. It wasn't as sharp and clear. With Pretty, we have 5 separate video angles that show he was not armed with the gun. He did not have the gun in his hand.
He did not have the gun in his hand, no.
He did not have the gun in his hand. He never threatened to use the gun. He had a phone in his hand. His other hand was held up. They were very clear what was going on. He had a legal permit to carry that weapon. It was carried safely in a holster. There was no reason for them to shoot him 5 times in the back. Once they had taken that gun out of the holster, he had 8 guys on him. They had beaten him in the face and head already with a tear gas canister. One of the officers, you can see it very clearly. He was on the ground. He struggling? Of course he was struggling. You would too. When people are pepper spraying you in the face and beating you, you're trying to get away from it. They took the gun away and then fired 5 times in his back. When they discovered he was dead, they stopped to count the bullet holes, but not to give him CPR or help him. Those images were so shocking to Americans, even those on the right who have been, frankly, pumping up the immigration storyline because they know it's politically valuable for them. It slammed the brakes on a lot of that, and it really did show that people like Greg Bovino and a lot of these ICE guys and Border Patrol guys, even the ones with adequate training, have not sufficiently understood that they have to treat American citizens with the rule of law and follow the Constitution and not just kill Americans because you don't like what they're saying to you.
Well, what do you make of the man who's going to replace him, Tom Homan? Trump described him as tough but fair, but said that he'll sort of be directly reporting to Trump from Minneapolis. And I guess, is it the case that the Bovino is gone, some agents are going with him, but like they're not just leaving the city, right?
No, they're not leaving the city, and there's an incentive structure in Trump's world right now where there's a White House internal war going on between Stephen Miller on the one hand and Susie Wiles, his chief of staff, on the other. Wiles is telling him to turn down the volume, lower the temperature, get Bovino out of there, because Bovino is the one who is very much encouraging a culture with these agents of brutality. The idea that Tom Homan is going to be somehow better on this only works for people who haven't dealt with Tom Homan. He's not as clownish as Greg Bovino, but he's not going to change what Stephen Miller wants him to do, which is to continue this use of ICE, Border Patrol, various other forces of DHS that are in Minnesota, to send a political message of shut up to American citizens. Because, when they deployed there, this was a novel mission for ICE because they were deployed there to, quote, deal with the Somali fraud, whatever that means. And they've spent much more of their energy harassing and abusing American citizens who are protesting them than they have actually going out and arresting or detaining these alleged criminals. So it is, this issue has turned and soured for Trump in a way that I won't say we couldn't have anticipated it, but the degree to which the pretty and good killings have catalyzed it is quite remarkable.
Yeah. What about Stephen Miller? Do you read anything into Caroline Leavitt last night in the White House? Kind of, I think she refused to sort of be drawn on or back up his previous comments when he called him a would-be assassin.
He is the most powerful man in the White House, by far.
And this doesn't change that.
This does not change that. Miller has a connection in Trump's mind to the sort of id of the MAGA base. And that is something that Trump very much values. And Miller is a very skillful internal bureaucratic fighter. So he will, I would predict Susie Wiles goes before Stephen Miller goes. He may sacrifice a rook, like Kristi Noem, in order to keep the immigration operations going, because he wants to try to remove 1 million immigrants a year from the country, legal or otherwise.
Yeah, I think him and Kristi Noem had a meeting in the Oval Office last night, and I believe the New York Times is reporting that they think at least imminently she's not at risk of losing her job, but
she's not. I don't think she's at imminent risk of it, but I think she and her counselor / alleged boyfriend Corey Lewandowski, who used to be very close in Trump world and is now sort of on the outer orbit of it. I think they're on thin ice, and I think that Trump is going to keep her out there in the public facing stuff as much as he can. He likes her look. He likes her ability to just go out and lie. He likes her stubbornness in media interviews. She's been media trained in a certain MAGA way to never, ever, ever, ever concede a point, which Trump really likes. But she has let Bovino run a little roughshod, and that's where they're a little nervous right now. it all comes back to Miller in the end. If Miller decides she's a liability, she's out. If he decides that she is going to, toe the line, she stays.
Well, this is if obviously Bavino has essentially been sacked, right? Christy Noem might be next. I get that this is politics, but if they sort of do lose their jobs, I can't really imagine they were people that were acting as rogue agents, right?
Oh no! This is very much at the direction of Miller and Trump at the White House. They have very closely monitored and managed this set of activities that's been going on in Minneapolis, and prior to that in Los Angeles and New Orleans and other places. And these people don't jump very far unless they're told to by Miller or someone in that food chain.
Even with the kind of rollback we've seen in the last 24 hours, how can the administration cool the temperature within his own party? Because I'm going to read a list of names of Republican senators that have spoken out. Rand Paul. I mean, Rand Paul used to be, a Trump loyalist. Bill Cassidy, Tom Tillis, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Andrew Garbarino, just to name a handful.
Francis Rooney, a Republican congressman who's been a very rank and file Trump guy, came out today with a frankly kind of impassioned statement saying this is not how America should and can run. We can't do it this way. There is a growing sense, particularly in those vulnerable Republican seats, that the one issue they could have held on to, the one thing they could cling to, we're closing the border, we're getting the bad guys out, has now been turned against them. It has now been inverted on them, and they are very nervous. And again, Mike Johnson knows they're going to lose the House. Does he lose it with a 10-seat minority, or does he lose it with a 40-seat minority? And if it has the same catalyzing effect that it's had so far, because I don't see how he turns the immigration storyline around. If the election were held today, they would lose 40 to 45 seats. It would blow them out of the water. Safe Republican seats would be gone all over the country. They would lose the Senate if the election were held today. Now, I don't think the Senate is as likely to go Democratic as some people, but it's on the table now.
And do you think the president would have come to the realization himself, or would his advisors around him will be telling, okay, you actually need to back off now on this?
I think there are a few people around Trump. Susie Wiles is one. Chris LaCivita, his chief political strategist on the outside, is another. Tony Fabrizio, his pollster, is another. They have been telling him that this has gone too far. The visuals are too much. The impact of this is not what you think it is. However, that hasn't been sufficient to undo that incentive loop that happens on the right. That this generates a lot of content and online stories, and the entire MAGA sort of political influencer ecosystem that feed off of these things to generate pro-Trump content. They liked what they were getting out of Minnesota until Alex Preddy.
Even after Renee Nicole Good, you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They felt there was enough ambiguity with Renee Good, because the video just wasn't as sharp. And there's another sort of ugly aspect to it, is that Renee Good had a wife, had the LGBT aspect of her life triggered a lot of these social conservatives who think that that's the great sin of all time. And the narrative of that had sort of settled in on the right, that she was some sort of lesbian left-wing agitator. Alex Preddy's a much harder story for them to tell in that regard. And he is, by all accounts, an extraordinarily good man. By all accounts, a guy who was helping people. By all accounts, not someone who was a radical left-winger, just a guy who gave a damn and showed up and got killed for it.
Donald Trump's not a ordinary politician, but it kind of seems to me that in the last sort of 24 hours, he's seen where maybe, I don't know, maybe the limits are. And I mean, there was a big story in the UK when he criticised sort of NATO troops for their role in Afghanistan. And we were all saying in the UK, the one thing you do not do as a leader is criticise the armed forces, right?
No.
Sorry, and in the US, we've now seen him as a Republican leader go near the Second Amendment,
which has not gone well for him.
I really want to ask you, I mean, where does that kind of leave? I don't know whether you call it a debate around the Second Amendment, but if the NRA are even coming out with statements against you as a Republican leader.
Yeah, I mean, and for generations, Republicans have won over a lot of rural voters and a lot of suburban male voters on one key message: the Democrats want to take your guns away. Well, now you've got the administration, that are out there saying, "Oh, he was carrying a gun, therefore that made him a domestic terrorist." The Second Amendment in America, as controversial as it is for other countries, is pretty deeply wired into our culture. And it's not everybody who owns a gun is a wild-haired lunatic. A lot of people carry a weapon for self-protection, and because we're a country with a lot of people who are, but he had a legal right to carry that gun. He was not threatening anyone with it, and the Supreme Court and the long practice of our Constitution has been that individual self-protection is a right contained under the Second Amendment. And the way they've spun it to basically try to make him into a villain, it's calling him a domestic terrorist, Stephen Miller calling him an assassin. I think it is put a wedge into that MAGA movement.
And when you see the kind of rhetoric against the administration in Iran, which I think a lot of people would probably agree with that, and the crackdown from the government there on protests, and then you see everything we've seen in the last 24 hours where the government come out with a series of statements, and all of the video angles seem to completely contradict that. I mean, it's quite difficult to take it seriously.
Right. Look, if you're going to say the government of Iran is evil, they're shooting unarmed protesters, and we're shooting unarmed protesters, we sort of lose the moral high ground of a criticism of the particularly egregious Iranian regime, which is theocratic and violent and corrupt at by almost any definition. And if we're going to say that America is so much better than that, are we though? We just haven't got to the same scale. We're doing our killings of American citizens retail rather than wholesale.
And just very quickly, finally, I don't think this is really a concern much of the administration, but how it makes America look on the global stage, because it was quite unexpected when I saw this today. But ICE agents are going to be going to the Winter Olympics in Milan from sort of, I think is it next week? It's the start of February, to help sort of provide security for the US athletes. And the Milan mayor has essentially said, no, we don't want you. They called it a militia that kills and said they're not welcome in Milan.
Yeah, I suspect that is going to be reversed rather quickly. I can't imagine they can take the political heat of that, especially now, especially at this moment. And it also sort of undermines the Trump argument that immigration is the biggest crisis in the country, and we've got to have every immigration agent on the streets at every hour of the day and night because it's so dangerous. Well, you're going to send 100 of them, 200 of them, however many, over to the Olympics for a junket? I don't think so.
I've no idea if it's something that had previously been arranged, but to announce it today seems tone deaf at best.
A bit, yes.
Anyway, Rick, we'll keep up to date with that here on the Trump Report. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Fergus. Great to be with you as always.